Hello, this is Claudia, and for the next hour I'll be reading from the April 15th issue of the New York Times on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. A divided America processes a war that Trump has scarcely explained. As the war in Iran extends into its seventh week and a truce feels increasingly shaky, many Americans express bewilderment about a conflict that came with little warning. Crystal Zimmerman, an Army veteran who fought in Iraq, is worried about America's latest war in the Middle East. She supported attacking Iran's nuclear sites, but as the conflict lurches from bombings and threats of annihilation to a shaky truce with no clear exit, she worries that President Trump has now stumbled into his own forever war. It's a waste of resources, a waste of money, and we come off as bullies, Ms. Zimmerman, age 40, said after she wrapped up a recent appointment at a Veterans Affairs clinic in Colorado Springs, where she receives treatment for the depression and sleeplessness that followed her home from Baghdad. Many Americans are expressing anger, frustration, even bewilderment as the war on Iran grinds into its seventh week. Over the weekend, peace talks fizzled, and Mr. Trump reverted to bombast and conflicting statements as he ordered a blockade of Iranian ports to counter Iran's closure of the Strait of Hormuz. Public opinion surveys show that roughly 6 in 10 Americans oppose the U.S.-led war against Iran, a striking shift from the solid public support that accompanied the United States invasions of Iraq and of Afghanistan in the early 2000s, or the Persian Gulf War in the 1990s. Some say they are simply baffled by a war that they feel the president did not prepare them for, and that still has not been clearly explained. I don't think Trump is making wise decisions, Amelia Lorenzen, age 19, said as she and a friend sipped coffees in Fayetteville, North Carolina, home to the sprawling Fort Bragg Army Base, which serves as headquarters to both Army Special Operations and the 3rd Special Forces Group. But it has been a muted opposition unfurling in conversation at cafes and veteran halls, and prompting smaller demonstrations instead of the huge protests that accompanied the Vietnam War or the run-up to the 2003 invasion of Iraq. I'm incredulous that more people aren't in the streets, but yeah, it's kind of hard to be surprised or even shocked by anything he does now, Mike Keefe, age 64, said of the president as he stood with a diminished cluster of protesters outside an immigration detention center in Portland, Oregon. The opposition to the Iran war splits largely along party lines. Democratic voters overwhelmingly oppose the war, while most Republican voters back the president, according to a survey conducted by Pew Research Center before the recent ceasefire. But in a sign of potential trouble for President Trump and Republicans fighting to keep control of Congress, the Pew survey also found that independent voters who lean toward the Republican Party were more closely divided, with 52% saying they approved of how Mr. Trump was handling the war and 45% saying they disapproved. Fissures within the Republican Party are primarily coming from outside of Mr. Trump's core base, according to a CNN poll taken in mid-March. Republicans who do not identify as MAGA Republicans are less likely to support the war than their MAGA counterparts. Young Republicans are also far less likely to approve of Mr. Trump's decision to take military action than are Republicans older than 45, according to the poll. Voters who identify themselves as independent overall fall firmly in opposition. Even Republicans who are supportive of the war overall do not necessarily think things are progressing especially smoothly. Only about half of those Republicans said they thought the war was going well, according to the Pew poll. In 36 recent interviews, voters in military towns, including Colorado Springs, San Antonio, and Fayetteville, worried that Mr. Trump, who campaigned as a peace president opposed to fighting stupid wars, was bumbling the United States into another Iraq or Afghanistan. 6 weeks in, many said they still have no clear sense of the president's goals in Iran or why he had joined Israel in attacking now. It all felt so fast and erratic, they said. Past presidents such as George W. Bush and his father George H.W. Bush spent weeks, if not months, making the case for the attack on Afghanistan, the invasion of Iraq, and the operation to evict Saddam Hussein from Kuwait. Coalitions, willing or not, were formed. Debates rang through the halls of Congress. Nothing like that preceded the attack on Iran, and the blizzard of shifting statements that Mr. Trump has offered in phone calls with reporters and late-night Truth Social posts only added to some people's confusion. Nearly two-thirds of voters and 71% of political independents said they thought Mr. Trump had not provided a clear explanation in the lead-up to the war, according to a Quinnipiac University poll from early March. By contrast, polls showed that a large majority of the public felt that Mr. Bush had made a compelling case ahead of the war in Iraq. Ms. Lorenzen, who voted for Mr. Trump, was particularly disturbed by his vow to annihilate the entire Iranian civilization if Iran did not reopen the Strait of Hormuz, a threat averted at the last minute when the United States and Iran agreed to a 2-week ceasefire. One of Trump's biggest campaign motives was that he is not a man of war, Mr. Lorenzen said, and then you see us moving to war so quickly after saying that. It just doesn't really make sense. The failures in Iraq and Afghanistan, which killed more than 7,000 American service members and contractors, shaped voters' views of America's latest war of choice. In interviews, they brought up the false claims about weapons of mass destruction used to justify the 2003 invasion of Iraq and the bloody withdrawal from Afghanistan, and wondered whether history was about to repeat itself. Queda Rodriguez, age 55, a Marine veteran who was working at a base in Quantico, Virginia on September 11, 2001, said she remembered a sense of collective grief and American solidarity after the attacks. She had disagreed with Mr. Bush's rationale for invading Iraq, but felt he had at least tried to bring Americans on board. Now Ms. Rodriguez, who lives in San Antonio, said she was angry with Mr. Trump for taking the nation to war in a region where many soldiers had already lost lives. She felt disappointed with Congress for not reining in the president and saddened that many Americans seemed to be tuning out. Other veterans and military family members who generally skew Republican said they still supported Mr. Trump in his war. They applauded him for attacking a theocracy that sponsored terrorism across the Middle East and had helped to kill hundreds of American troops. If Mr. Trump's critics said the attacks on Iran were haphazard, his supporters believe they were overdue. It's a threat. It needs to be neutralized, said Gary Fries, age 58, who served in Iraq and now rides his Harley-Davidson motorcycle through the Rocky Mountains. He said Mr. Trump had showed he's got spine by attacking Iran. There is also a wellspring of support for Mr. Trump's war in places like rural western Iowa, where he won the last 3 presidential elections by increasing margins. Kelly Garrett, age 51, who sells steaks from the cattle he raises, was one of the several farmers who supported the administration's attacks on Iran, even if they did not fully understand the rationale. Many Republicans hold an abiding trust in the president. Farm country, already reeling from Mr. Trump's tariffs and immigration enforcement, suffered another economic hit when the shutdown of the Strait of Hormuz sent fertilizer and diesel prices skyrocketing just as farmers were preparing their fields and machinery for planting. Yet many Republican farmers in Iowa blame the high prices on corporate profiteers, not Mr. Trump. Wayne Brinks, age 72, a retired farmer, said the short-term pain would be worth it if it prevented Iran from developing a nuclear weapon. These guys are religious zealots, Mr. Brinks said of Iran's leadership. I think the president thought it was now or never and we had to do something. But even in deep red Iowa, doubts and worries are starting to emerge like the first shoots of corn. Mark Nelson, age 35, a farmer and Republican supervisor in Woodbury County who voted for Mr. Trump, said the attacks undermined the president's America First message. That criticism has also been bubbling up among influencers in the Trump movement, including from Tucker Carlson, Alex Jones, and Megyn Kelly. The amount of money and resources that have gone into this war is ridiculous, Mr. Nelson said. He had questions about how much Israel had influenced the president's decision to enter the war. I don't think there was any imminent danger. Iran War Live updates. Iran threatens retaliation over U.S. blockade. Iran's armed forces said they would attempt to expand their influence over sea lanes beyond the Strait of Hormuz if the U.S. military continued to block Iranian shipping. Here's the latest. Iran on Wednesday threatened further retaliation over an American naval blockade of its ports in the critical Strait of Hormuz, as the U.S. military said that it had completely halted trade in and out of Iran by sea. More than 10,000 soldiers, as well as dozens of planes and warships, are enforcing the blockade, the U.S. military said. In response, the Iranian military said on state media that it could expand its grip over critical shipping routes beyond the strait if the U.S. blockade continued. Iran's powerful armed forces will not allow any exports or imports to continue in the Persian Gulf, the Sea of Oman, and the Red Sea, said Major General Ali Abdullahi, leader of the Military Joint Command that oversees Iran's Army and Revolutionary Guards. Mediators are rushing to shore up a 2-week ceasefire in the war between the United States, Israel, and Iran that expires April 21st. But the future of the talks is unclear after a meeting between Vice President J.D. Vance and senior Iranian leaders over the weekend in Pakistan ended without a breakthrough. Esmail Bahaki, a senior Iranian official, said that Iran had continued to exchange messages with the United States through Pakistan since the talks ended on Sunday morning. President Trump, in an interview with Fox Business, again deemed the conflict close to over, a claim he has made repeatedly, while also suggesting that U.S. attacks could continue as long as needed to keep Iran from obtaining a nuclear weapon. Iran has not fully relaxed its control over the Strait of Hormuz, the Persian Gulf conduit for oil and gas, which Mr. Trump said was a precondition for the current truce. Iran began blockading the Strait of Hormuz as a pressure tactic during the war, rattling the world economy and sending energy prices soaring. Reaching a deal to end the war would require not only an agreement to reopen the strait, but also an agreement over Iran's nuclear program and Israel's military campaign in Lebanon against Hezbollah, the Iran-backed militant group. The United States announced on Tuesday that Israel and Lebanon had agreed to launch direct negotiations to end fighting between Israel and Hezbollah in Lebanon. The announcement followed a rare face-to-face meeting in Washington between the Israeli and Lebanese ambassadors. Hezbollah condemned the Lebanese government for negotiating with Israel, however, and it was unclear whether any Israel-Lebanon agreement would lead to an end in the fighting. Hezbollah has long been Lebanon's dominant military and political force, defying attempts by the official Lebanese government to assert control. Here's what else we're covering. Lebanon, the talks between Israel and Lebanon did not lead to an immediate ceasefire. Israeli forces bombarded towns in southern Lebanon on Wednesday. According to Lebanese state media, several people were killed in a strike in the coastal town of Ansariya, Lebanon's official national news agency said. Iranian rescues. Emergency teams have rescued more than 7,200 Iranians from rubble after U.S. and Israeli bombings throughout the war, the president of Iran's Red Crescent Society, Pir Hossein Kolovan, said. The Iranian authorities have released little comprehensive information about the dead and wounded in the country more than a month in the war. Death tolls. The human rights activist news agency said at least 1,701 civilians, including 254 children, have been killed in Iran as of last Wednesday. Lebanon's health ministry said on Tuesday that 2,124 people have been killed in the latest fighting between Israel and Hezbollah. In attacks attributed to Iran, at least 32 people have been killed in Persian Gulf nations. At least 22 people have been killed in Israel as of Sunday, as well as 12 Israeli soldiers fighting in Lebanon. The American death toll stands at 13 service members. Japan pledges $10 billion to help countries cope with oil prices. With supply chains at risk, the aid to Southeast Asian nations is aimed at securing the availability of oil-based products, including medical equipment. Japan said it would provide about $10 billion in financial support to help Southeast Asian nations cope with soaring oil prices that threaten production of petroleum-derived products in the region. Japan's Prime Minister, Sanae Taichi, announced the initiative on Wednesday at a regional forum that included Japan and major Southeast Asian economies such as Thailand, Vietnam, the Philippines, and Malaysia. The pledge comes as much of Asia is being buffeted by disruptions in oil supplies stemming from the war in the Middle East. With crude prices surging, the aid is intended to help less wealthy nations in the region buy oil from the United States and other suppliers. For Japan, the move is a bid to shore up its own industries and supply chains. Southeast Asia, in particular, has been battered by the global drop-off in oil supplies. The region is a major manufacturer of products derived from oil that are crucial to producing everything from plastics to clothing, underscoring how the war in the Middle East is disrupting not only a fuel, but an essential ingredient for global manufacturing. Ms. Taichi said she hopes the financial aid will bolster factories in Southeast Asia. Japan will not simply provide oil to countries struggling due to the situation in the Middle East, but will work together with Asian countries to build a resilient energy and critical mineral supply chain, Ms. Taichi said. Japan's financial support was about a year's worth of Southeast Asian oil imports, she said. Japan maintains one of the world's largest strategic petroleum reserves, equivalent to 254 days of domestic demand. It began releasing those stocks last month. Still, industry experts have flagged a point of friction. Japan's stockpiles are dedicated to domestic oil refiners, not foreign nations. Japan has recently struggled with a shortage of naphtha, a crude oil derivative. Earlier this week, the Japanese toilet maker Toto said it was suspending new orders for its prefabricated bathroom units, citing a shortage of naphtha-derived solvents. Concerns are also mounting over Japan's supply chain for petroleum-derived medical goods. Earlier this month, several patient and physician groups submitted a joint request to Japan's health ministry urging officials to identify which medical equipment supply lines are most at risk from the reduced production of oil byproducts. Ms. Taichi said Japan relies on Asian countries for supplies such as hemodialysis equipment, waste fluid containers, and surgical gloves. Fuel shortages and supply chain disruptions in Asia would hinder the procurement of medical supplies from Asia to Japan, Ms. Taichi said. The country is therefore distributing aid, she said, in order to protect the lives and livelihoods of its citizens. You are listening to a reading of articles and features from the New York Times on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. Vance gets heckled at Turning Point event and pushes back against Pope. An audience member heckled Vice President J.D. Vance on Tuesday at a Turning Point USA event, and Vance addressed Pope Leo's criticism of the war in Iran, saying he should be careful when speaking about theology. Heckler: Jesus Christ does not support genocide. Vance: I certainly think the answer is yes. Vance: and I agree. Vance: Jesus Christ does not. Vance: I agree, Jesus Christ certainly does not support genocide. Vance: whoever yelled that out from the dark. Heckler: you're involved, J.D., you're killing children. Vance: right now you see more humanitarian aid. Vance: coming into Gaza than it has any time in the past 5 years. I recognize that a lot of young voters don't love the policy that we have in the Middle East. I like that the Pope is an advocate for peace. I think that's certainly one of his roles. On the other hand, how can you say that God is never on the side of those who wield the sword? Was God on the side of the Americans who liberated France from the Nazis? I think it's very, very important for the Pope to be careful when he talks about matters of theology. And I think that one of these issues here is that there is, again, hey, random dude screaming, I told you I'd respond to your point. Opinion guest essay, The Great Ozempic Experiment. In November 2017, on a bike ride to pick up her daughters from daycare in Portland, Oregon, Laurel Schmidt was hit by a car and tossed headfirst over her handlebars. She walked away with a bruised elbow and a headache that, over the next few days, became excruciating. She was in her mid-30s at the time. Her suffering didn't meaningfully abate for nearly 10 years. Ms. Schmidt was diagnosed with a traumatic brain injury and severe post-concussion syndrome with no cure, frequently dizzy with her vision impaired and her memory faltering. She felt as though she was living inside a snow globe, constantly shaken up. She no longer trusted herself to cook out of fear she'd forget to turn the stove off. She stopped driving after she noticed she couldn't register traffic light changes quickly enough. Most days she'd hide away in a dark room, seeing her children for only short periods of time. That was until early 2025 when Ms. Schmidt discovered animal and cell research demonstrating that GLP-1s, the class of medicines that includes Ozempic and Wegovy, could potentially treat concussions. She tracked down several researchers involved in the studies, including the Indiana University chemist Richard DiMarchi. He suggested that she ask her doctor about trying a GLP-1 drug off-label, a common practice in which a medication is prescribed for a use that's not yet formally approved. Within days of starting on Zepbound, last February, Ms. Schmidt felt her concussion symptoms finally begin to ease. A former endurance athlete and methodical tracker of all things, she used the post-concussion symptom scale to assess the severity of her condition. In the weeks following the crash, she scored over 100 out of a possible 132, indicating extreme impairment. When I talked to her last autumn, she had scored 6. On Thanksgiving, she ran a turkey trot with her daughters, her first race since the accident. She described the turnaround to me as miraculous. Like so many people who are taking these drugs for intractable and varied symptoms, Ms. Schmidt has joined what we might call the Great American GLP-1 experiment. Technology moves fast while science accumulates slowly. Humans have a history of rushing ahead with new technology well before understanding how it affects us. Just think of smartphones and ultra-processed foods. Still, GLP-1s may be a medical first, a blockbuster drug class, enthusiastically taken up by millions, not for one or a few uses, but it appears a multitude. They're also the first blockbuster drugs to collide with our wellness-obsessed algorithmic age. People online tout microdosing GLP-1s for longevity. Subreddits swap stories about using the medicines for menopause symptoms. Fitness influencers promote unimproved formulations for bodybuilding. So much of the experimentation with GLP-1s is happening outside of traditional research models. Careful clinical trials and even the health system. Given the immense popularity of these drugs, regulators and the medical establishment need urgently to figure out how to best capture and keep pace with the experiment, otherwise it risks spinning out of control. In the last year, I've been talking to GLP-1 patients as well as researchers and physicians who are using or prescribing the drugs for an astounding range of diseases and conditions. Many report success. Debilitating long COVID symptoms dissolved. Decades of uncomfortable bouts of irritable bowel syndrome relieved. Patients said that the drugs loosened the grip of their addictions to drugs, cigarettes, alcohol, and sex. Still others reported cognitive benefits like decreased anxiety and brain fog and improved focus. The tenor of these stories surprised me. Times Opinion asked the polling company Morning Consult to survey over 2,000 adults who have used GLP-1s. Before getting the results, I suspected that the reality of taking the drugs would be messier than the triumphalist headlines. The drugs can have unsavory side effects, most frequently nausea. Many people stop taking them because of those side effects, and perhaps even more so, cost and insurance barriers. But the survey respondents were enthusiastic. 65% of current or past GLP-1 users said they were very interested in continuing to take the drugs. More remarkably, 63% said if their GLP failed to help the condition it was initially prescribed to treat, they would either definitely or probably keep taking it for other benefits. Over 2,000 GLP users answered our survey about how the drug has affected them beyond weight loss. Body image, 64%, got better. Productivity, 59%. Relationships with family and friends, 49%. Social life, 48%. Memory, 45%. Fertility, 39%. The poll results have limitations as the answers are self-reported, but directionally, they suggest that people are finding relief where they hadn't even been looking. The more patients and physicians I've spoken to about this phenomenon, the clearer it has become. We are only at the beginning of the Ozempic era, but it is already shaping our culture and changing how disease is understood and treated. An estimated 1 in 8 people in the United States alone have taken GLP-1s, placing the drugs among the most widely prescribed in the country right now. A significant number of those people are experimenting with off-label uses like Ms. Schmidt or remaining on the drugs for unexpected benefits. This experimentation is also driven by how the drugs seem to cut across the familiar borders of illness in ways that doctors hadn't seen before. What we've come to realize, said Dr. DiMarchi, who was a vice president at Eli Lilly and involved in GLP-1 research there until he left the company in 2003, is that many diseases may share the same root causes even though we label them and treat them as distinct. This is an endocrine disease. This is a cardiovascular disease. This is a brain disease. This root cause theory suggests that a wide range of conditions can be treatable with one drug class, sometimes through pathways in the brain and immune system. But Dr. DiMarchi added, what we know right now is small relative to what we don't know. Many people who began taking GLP-1s to address obesity found that the drugs helped with other chronic conditions that they were living with. Cynthia Patterson, age 44, began taking Zepbound to lose weight for her surgery. I was diagnosed with alopecia acreta. In 2021, my hair had started to fall out in large circular patches. I had long curly hair. It was the part of who I am. As my dose stabilized, my hair has grown back in thick texture. Same beautiful curls are forming. Zachary Moss, age 41, was prescribed Zepbound for obesity-related sleep apnea. I've been trying to quit cannabis for a long time, also I started my loading dose. I had zero desire to consume cannabis. It didn't realize the mental impact staying sober would have on me. I was missing the feeling of being present, and that became important when I had my daughter. Maren Ziedler, age 74, started Ozempic for weight loss, then switched to generic trizepatide. Cancer treatments left my digestive process impaired to the point when some days I didn't feel confident enough to leave the house once I got to a particular level of medication in my body. For some reason, the constipation thing kicked in. If I never had another ounce of weight to lose, I would stay on this drug. When GLP-1 medicines exploded onto the market for weight loss, experts offered a simple theory for how the drugs worked. They act as a souped-up version of a natural gut hormone called GLP-1, which signals satiety. The idea was that the drugs mimic the body's own hormonal signal, but more forcefully, making people feel fuller, faster, eat less, and ultimately lose weight. And it's just not true, said Dr. Randy Seeley, a GLP-1 researcher and director of the University of Michigan's Nutrition Obesity Research Center. The GLP-1 hormone that our bodies produce mostly in the gut and brain, and to a lesser extent in the pancreas, does almost nothing important physiologically, said Dr. Daniel Drucker, a researcher based at Toronto's Lundfeld Tannenbaum Research Institute, whose GLP-1 discoveries helped lay the foundation for today's drugs. GLP-1 is among hundreds of chemical signals circulating in the body, parts of the chorus that shapes our physiology and behavior, rather than a lead star. What makes GLP drugs so powerful is how the hormone behaves when given as medicine. GLP receptors are found all over the body, and when people receive much higher, longer-lasting doses than humans produce naturally, a wide range of benefits surface. In the case of obesity, the weight loss effects don't come from the gut but originate in the brain. The brain has its own GLP-1 signaling system, which helps guide appetite in ways researchers are still just beginning to unravel. The importance of native brain GLP-1 is still a bit of mystery, said Dr. Drucker, who, like Dr. Seeley, consults for GLP-1 drug makers. Natural GLP-1 in the brain doesn't seem to affect appetite much. When artificially raised, however, the brain's GLP-1 system powerfully blunts the urge to eat. Scientists initially thought GLP-1 worked for weight loss by raising natural satiety signals into the gut. But it turns out the weight loss effects may originate in the brain. There are GLP-1 receptors throughout the brain. Important signals from the medicine get relayed through the brainstem and forwarded to deeper parts of the brain. The brainstem also sends signals out to the digestive system to promote fullness, and it sends out messages to other parts of the body that further promote satiety and boost metabolism. But GLP-1 receptors exist in many more organs, so there are probably even more mechanisms at play for weight loss that we have yet to discover. Researchers discovered that weight loss effects of GLP-1s is serendipitously. GLP-1 medicines were first approved for treating type 2 diabetes, a disease where the body can't properly use or doesn't make enough insulin to control blood glucose levels. In 2005. As clinicians tried higher doses in clinical trials for diabetes, they began to notice patients spontaneously losing weight. Unexpected benefits for kidney and liver disease turned up in the diabetes trials, too. The Food and Drug Administration requires drug companies to run studies investigating whether GLP-1s increase the risk of cardiovascular problems, a mandate for all diabetes drugs. These studies have shown a 20% reduction in heart attacks, strokes, and death from cardiovascular problems. GLP-1s are now being prescribed for patients with conditions such as heart disease, sleep apnea, and advanced fatty liver disease. Clinical trials are testing different uses of the medications. for everything from treating arthritis to improving survival outcomes for cancer patients. Part of this was predictable. Weight loss has long been known to enhance overall health and reduce the risk of everything from certain cancers to diabetes and cardiovascular problems. Since the drugs help people lose weight, it wasn't surprising that they would deliver additional health gains. But what surprises everyone is how many benefits are weight independent, said Dr. Seeley. In recent studies, the health gains for cardiovascular, liver, and kidney disease, for example, happen regardless of whether patients lose weight. Explaining why GLP drugs improve health without weight loss defies simple narratives and confounds researchers. I've never come across another medical story where scientists repeatedly apologize for how bewildering their results appear to be. For each one of the drugs they dig into, they come to different explanations for how the drugs help. In some cases, GLP-1s seem to target the organs involved in diseases directly, making them healthier. In other cases, the drugs help the body handle blood sugar and fat, making people more metabolically flexible and biochemically more youthful, said Dr. DiMarchi. One of the most mysterious and fascinating ways they work is through reducing inflammation. Inflammation is part of the body's natural response to injury and infection. It can signal healing, but it can also be present and harmful in the context of chronic disease. Dr. Drucker's lab at the University of Toronto has pivoted from studying chronic diseases like diabetes and obesity to unraveling the immune system effects of GLP-1s. We realized very quickly one underlying theme of all this was inflammation, he said, of the diseases. Before GLP-1s, medicines that targeted inflammation like steroids worked by shutting it down, suppressing the immune system, and making patients more vulnerable to infections and cancer. The effects of GLP-1s appears to be more subtle. Researchers told me they believe the drugs dampen or fine-tune the immune response without the sledgehammer effect of steroids. One called this a new frontier in medicine. Dr. Drucker has found that the cells in the gut that produce GLP-1 seem to detect pathogens, releasing the hormone as part of the body's response to injury or infection. The drugs may harness that effect, but even the anti-inflammatory narrative of how GLP-1 drugs work is complicated, depending on the type and location of inflammation involved. We should not assume, as many do, that there is one simple way the drugs lower inflammation in all organs and conditions, Dr. Drucker said. In Ms. Schmidt's case, Dr. DiMarchi suspects that the GLP-1 may have reduced damaging inflammation in her brain from her post-concussion syndrome, which played a role in her turnaround. There's incredible promise here, said Dr. DiMarchi, who thinks there should be human trials testing GLP-1s for concussions, but let's not get ahead of ourselves. You're listening to a reading of articles and features from the New York Times on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. Trump increased tax refunds, but a political challenge still looms. While last year's tax law has raised the average IRS refund, the boost is less than the White House expected and may not have much impact on voters. Almost immediately after passing a giant tax cut last summer, many Republicans began to eagerly anticipate this year's tax day. They had written the law so that many of its new benefits would arrive in the form of a larger tax refund this year. The hope was that the Americans would take notice of the bigger cash payments, a result of making several new tax cuts retroactive to the start of 2025, and reward Republicans in the fall's midterm elections. President Trump's tax cuts did succeed in increasing refunds this year. The average so far is $3,462, about $350 or 11% larger than a year ago, according to the Internal Revenue Service data through April 3rd. But that's well below what Mr. Trump initially promised. The White House had projected that the average refund would grow by $1,000 or more, echoing some Wall Street analysts. The increase was smaller than expected, even though many Americans are taking advantage of the new tax cuts. More than 53 million people have claimed at least one of the cuts, reflecting Mr. Trump's 2024 campaign promises, which include new tax breaks on tips and overtime, along with new deductions for seniors and some auto loan interest, according to Treasury officials. The reason for the shortcoming is most likely that more of the tax relief from the law has gone toward reducing what people owe the IRS when they file, rather than increasing refunds. And lowering people's tax bills may be less politically persuasive form of relief than a big refund, highlighting the challenge that Republicans now face in trying to sell the American public on the law. Still, Republicans and the Trump administration have continued to hail the tax law's benefits. Frank Bisignano, the chief executive of the IRS, is scheduled to testify before the Senate on Wednesday about this year's filing season. Mr. Trump, who has spent much of his first term promoting these policies, plans to travel to Nevada on Thursday to again tout the tax cut on tips. It is always difficult to wring much political reward out of a tax cut. Republicans lost the House in 2018 despite passing a major tax cut at the end of 2017. Political scientists generally see a weak relationship between policy changes and voter attitudes. Some studies have shown that people who received a new tax benefit credited the additional funds to the person who helped them file their taxes rather than the political party that passed the law. Kimberly Grayson is a 43-year-old elementary school teacher and a single mother in Fayetteville, New York. She makes about $58,000 a year, she said, and her tax refund was $4,600, roughly $2,000 more than she expected. She said that she was not sure why her refund was so large, but that in any case, she planned to use the extra money to help pay for her son's travel baseball. I'm super grateful for any help that I can get, so a larger tax refund definitely helps, Ms. Greason said, but that is not going to affect how I vote in the future at all. I have voted for Republicans, but I'm not a Republican. My beliefs still align much more with the Democratic Party. Even with the larger average refund, last year's tax law was going to be complicated to pitch to the public. Much of it was dedicated to continuing the tax cuts that Republicans passed in 2017, an expensive extension that did not result in any noticeable tax savings for Americans. The tax cuts that Republicans added on top of the extension apply only to specific taxpayers, like people who work for tips or can earn overtime. In a poll conducted by the Bipartisan Policy Center, a centrist think tank, 38% of taxpayers said they did not notice a difference in their taxes this year. Roughly a quarter said that the law had harmed them, while a quarter said it had helped them. The law also included cuts to Medicaid and food stamps. Those changes will affect smaller slices of the population, but they mean that the law harms poor people more than it helps. In general, higher-income Americans gained the most from the tax cut overall. The war in Iran has disrupted global oil supplies and raised costs across the economy, just as tax season was getting underway. Some analysts have found that the increase in gas prices could cancel out whatever stimulus emerged from the Trump tax cuts. Still, for many Americans, tax cuts will always be popular. Brianna Teague is a human resources professional who lives in the suburbs of Minneapolis. She and her husband earned roughly $200,000 last year, she said, and her refund was over $3,000, her first in a couple of years. Ms. Teague said that she leaned somewhat toward Republicans to begin with, but that policies like last year's tax cut made her feel more favorably toward the party. I don't hear anyone complaining about more money in their pockets at the end of the day, she said. Late-night laughs at explanations of Trump's Jesus joke. Ronny Chieng poked fun of J.D. Vance's defense of President Trump, posting an image of himself as a Christ-like figure. Welcome to Late Night Roundup. What a joke. On Tuesday, Vice President J.D. Vance explained that President Trump's social media post, an apparently AI-generated image depicting himself as a Jesus-like figure, was meant as a joke, and that it was deleted because a lot of people weren't understanding his humor. Or as Ronny Chieng put it on The Daily Show, poor J.D. Vance had to come out and explain why you don't get it. Quote, "Get over it, snowflakes. Where in the Trump Bible does it say you can't worship false idols?" It was a joke. What's the matter? You guys don't have jokes at Jesus camp? Okay, well, make up your mind. Is it a doctor or is it a joke? Is it a doctor or is it a joke like a chiropractor? He was posting a joke, you understand, and like all the best jokes, it had to be explained and then deleted. Jimmy Kimmel. First he was Jesus, then he wasn't Jesus. He was a doctor, and now it was a joke. Why did I get kicked off the air again? I can't remember. Jimmy Kimmel. Yeah, it was just humor. God humor. The Bible's full of it. Stephen Colbert. Phillips got in some interesting water recently when it came out that he claimed he once teleported to a Waffle House. Now it is possible this sci-fi adventure happened after consuming some teleportation juice. Jim, beam me up. Scotty. Stephen Colbert. He must be joking, right? You know, like when you tell everyone that you're Jesus, it's just a joke. Ronny Chieng. Wow, I never thought I'd hear a boring teleportation story, but... Ronny Chieng. You have the power of teleportation, but you use it to go to the Waffle House? Ronnie Chang. This guy teleports to all the exact places you end up when you're blackout drunk. That's just incredible. I mean, Tiger Woods is like, yeah, that happened to me too. I just teleported into an upside-down car. Ronnie Chang. The bit's worth watching. The comedic actor Zach Galifianakis told Jimmy Kimmel why he preferred to live in rural Canada, where fans show recognition in strange ways. Trump threatens to fire Powell if he does not resign from Fed. Although Jerome H. Powell's term as Fed chair officially ends on May 15th, he can stay on as a governor until 2028 and said he would not leave until a criminal investigation was over. President Trump vowed to fire Jerome H. Powell if he opted to stay on at the Federal Reserve after his term as chair ends, doubling down on criminal investigation into the central bank that is threatening to delay the confirmation of Mr. Powell's successor. Mr. Powell's tenure as chair officially ends on May 15th, but both the law and past precedents suggest that he can serve on a temporary basis until Mr. Trump's pick to replace him, Kevin M. Warsh, is confirmed by the Senate. Mr. Powell's term as a Fed governor also runs well beyond that date, allowing him to stay on at the central bank until 2028. The process to confirm Mr. Warsh has been complicated by the Justice Department's investigation into Mr. Powell and his handling of costly renovations at the Fed's headquarters in Washington. Mr. Trump said in a Fox Business interview that aired on Wednesday that the investigation was not just about the $2.5 billion project, but also about Mr. Powell's incompetence. Mr. Powell has blasted the investigation as a pretext to pressure the Fed to lower borrowing costs, which has long been Mr. Trump's goal when it comes to the Fed. Mr. Trump's decision to pick another fight with Mr. Powell at a moment when the fate of his choice for chair is already in limbo runs counter to recent signals sent by top administration officials and senior Republicans. Scott Bessent, the Treasury Secretary, said on Tuesday that we want Kevin Warsh in as soon as possible. Senator Tim Scott, Republican of South Carolina and chair of the Banking Committee, told Fox Business earlier that day that he believed the investigation would conclude within weeks, though he conceded that he had no evidence of that. Federal prosecutors have faced a litany of legal setbacks in their pursuit of the case. This month, a judge denied the department's request to reconsider an earlier ruling that quashed subpoenas issued to the central bank. Jeanine Pirro, the U.S. Attorney for the District of Columbia and a longtime friend and ally of Mr. Trump, has not officially appealed the decision but has shown no sign of dropping it either. On Tuesday, prosecutors from her office made an unannounced visit to the active construction site, prompting a rebuke from the Fed's outside counsel, who called the tour inappropriate and asked Ms. Pirro's office to commit to no similar actions without the presence of Fed lawyers. Ms. Pirro defended the visit, however, in a statement to the New York Times on Wednesday. Quote, any construction project that costs overruns of almost 80% over the original construction budget deserves some serious review, she said, and these people are in charge of monetary policy in the United States, end quote. Mr. Powell has made clear that he has no intention of leaving the board until the investigation is well and truly over with transparency and finality. His decision to stay or to go would ultimately be based on what he thought was the best for the institution and for the people we serve, Mr. Powell said. He also affirmed his ability to serve in a temporary capacity after May 15th if Mr. Warsh is not confirmed by then. That is what the law calls for. That's what we've done on several occasions, including involving me, and that's what we're going to do in this situation, Mr. Powell told reporters in March. Mr. Trump did not specify on Wednesday whether he would try to fire Mr. Powell if he assumed the role of chair pro tempore or did not leave the Fed altogether after his term as chair ends. Mr. Powell's decision depends on how he perceives the Fed's ability to operate independently amid a litany of attacks from Mr. Trump and increasingly aggressive efforts to try to wrest more control over the institution in the president's bid for substantially lower interest rates. Mr. Trump said he would only pick a chair who supported lower rates, but Mr. Warsh is likely to face pushback if he pursues that, at least in the coming months, given the economic impact of the war in Iran. Policy decisions are made by a 12-person committee made up of 7 members of the Board of Governors, the president of the Federal Reserve Bank of New York, and a rotating set of 4 presidents from the regional banks. Officials have indicated little urgency to lower rates because of their concerns about the risks to inflation in the face of an energy shock, while some have even come to talk more openly about the possibility that the central bank will need to raise rates at some point to tame price pressures. If Mr. Powell stayed on as governor, he would deny Mr. Trump a vacancy to fill with someone more amenable to his policy outlook. The president has tried to create openings in other ways, including by trying to fire another official, Lisa D. Cook, who was appointed by the Biden administration to serve on the Board of Governors. Mr. Trump cited unsubstantiated allegations of mortgage fraud as justification for having cause to fire her, the threshold that a president must meet in order to remove a Fed official. The Supreme Court is currently weighing her case, but based on the oral arguments held in January, the justices appear wary about any perceived incursion on the Fed's ability to set interest rates free of political meddling. You're listening to a reading of articles and features from the New York Times on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. Big money is betting on bagels. High-quality bagels were once the sole domain of a few major cities. Investors believe they can take the breakfast staple nationwide. In the last decade, investment firms like Blackstone and Bain Capital have acquired stakes in many of America's favorite foods. They vacuumed up big chunks of the fast food business, taking control of chains like Dunkin', Popeyes, and Burger King, and funding growth for regional brands like Jersey Mike's and Prince Street Pizza. High-quality bagels, with their finicky baking process, have always been notoriously unprofitable and unscalable, but recent developments in bakery and coffee technology, along with changes in social media, consumer tracking, capital funding, and delivery platforms have changed that. And now big money is coming for our bagels. Money has been chasing bagels for years, said Ben Coley, the editor of QSR, a magazine that covers a $350 billion quick-service food industry. With trend-obsessed young consumers posting on social media about Courage Bagels in Los Angeles, Bio Chick Bagels in Berkeley, and Apollo and Pop-Up Bagels in New York, the demand for hand-rolled, kettle-boiled bagels has suddenly exploded, and new chains are growing rapidly to meet it, especially in the South and the Sun Belt, where cities are expanding faster than food businesses can open, and the shortage of handmade bagels is chronic. Not all the offerings are strictly traditional, but the tangy interiors, chewy crisp crusts, and plentiful toppings are a major improvement on the puffy, pale bagels that have long ruled American strip malls. Here comes the premium bagel boom, Mr. Coley said. The first sign of private equity's interest in bagels came in 2023 when the food-focused fund Stripes invested $8 million in pop-up bagels just 3 months after its founder, Adam Goldberg, opened the first brick-and-mortar shop in the West Village of Manhattan. His grip, rip, and dip way of eating bagels hot, torn into pieces, and dipped into cream cheese went viral during the pandemic. Last year, Stripes became majority owner of the company with an additional $27 million investment. On Friday, Pop-Up Bagels opened its 29th shop in Washington, D.C., generating a line so long that the local NBC News affiliate showed up. Last year, Invus, an asset management company, acquired a majority stake in Call Your Mother Deli, a mom-and-pop bagel business in the Washington area that now has 7 shops in Colorado, with Chicago and Philadelphia soon to come. When we opened our 20th store, I suddenly got emails from every investment fund I'd ever heard of, said Jeff Pereira, co-founder of Jeff's Bagel Run, who began baking at home during the pandemic. He did not take the offers, instead choosing to expand to 33 stores through franchising since opening near Orlando, Florida in 2021. Making bagels the traditional way demands investment in time and space. After the dough is mixed and proofed overnight, it must be rolled and shaped by hand, risen again, then boiled and finally baked. So what would persuade investment managers to get their hands into something as sticky as the bagel business? Foodie culture used to be concentrated in pockets on the coast, said Chris Carey, a partner in Stripes, which is also a major investor in Levain Bakery, 7th Street Burger, and Erewhon, upscale brands with high visibility on social media. Now there's a national awareness, so if you build credibility with a bagel in New York, it's likely to sell in La Jolla and Tampa and in Charlotte. Americans are also drinking ever more coffee and less alcohol, making breakfast one of the fastest-growing segments in quick service, which includes not only traditional fast food, but convenience stores and gas stations, smoothie shops, and salad chains. Fewer and fewer people sit down for breakfast, bolstering growth in portable foods like donuts, cinnamon rolls, and bagels. Long-standing bagel chains like Einstein Brothers, Bruegger's, and Noah's, all owned by Panera Brands, are still operating, but growth has long been stagnant. Panera is focused on its signature Assaggio cheese bagel, which has ruled the category since it was introduced in the 1990s. In January, it unveiled its first new bagel flavor since 2014, the Everything Assaggio. Those mass brands have never seriously claimed to match the quality of a freshly baked, slow-risen, hand-rolled bagel. Many of the new startups promise to do just that. Whether they can maintain quality while scaling up at breathtaking rates is an open question. No one could figure out how to not have all that labor and equipment and square footage, said Jay Rushin, who bought the New York City legacy brand H&H Bagels in 2014. He solved the problem with a 20,000 square foot production facility in Queens, where all the chain's bagels are made, quick frozen and shipped to 18 locations, from Santa Monica, California, to Moynihan Train Hall in Manhattan. Before the acquisition, Mr. Rushin has no particular interest in bagels. He was a Wall Street veteran looking to buy a business with a lot of white space or room to grow. H&H already had a large wholesale operation and had long been shipping frozen bagels to Asia, where blueberry was and remains the most popular flavor. Stateside, however, the most popular and profitable item in every store is the same, the bacon, egg, and cheese sandwich. You can't stay afloat selling plain buttered bagels for $2 or $3, said Andre Samper, the founder of Manhattan Bagel Equity Fund, a bagel-specific investment fund that is focused on acquiring, rebranding, and scaling high-performing bagel shops across the United States. You need to sell sandwiches that are $15 or $16, or it's impossible to keep the lights on, he said. With an initial $5 million investment, the fund bought 2 Manhattan bagel shops and rebranded them as Go Bagels, where they are streamlining, modernizing, and evaluating factors like boiling versus steaming for a projected 400 stores. The development of sophisticated ovens that can quickly bake bagels throughout the day has also fueled growth. A modern bagel shop with a turbofan oven and little seating or staff like Pop-Up is efficient to slip into small storefront, like the Pistachio Green Blank Street coffee shops that have proliferated in American cities with backing from capital funds. Many of the new bagel shops also have Eversize, the automated espresso machines used by Blank Street that eliminate the need for an experienced barista. And old-school shops like Bagel Hole in Park Slope, Brooklyn, and New York Bagel in Ferndale, Michigan, egg sandwiches are not an option. Most won't even slice a bagel for you, much less toast it. This is partly because tradition holds that a fresh bagel doesn't need toasting, and partly because they are usually licensed as bakeries, not food service establishments, and therefore not allowed to prepare food. But at today's bagel cafes, there are no limits. Bagels are made at all hours and in all flavors, topped with buffalo or birthday cake flavored cream cheese, sandwiched with trendy condiments like Mike's Hot Honey, or stuffed with red sauce and mozzarella at a new contender, Moonrise Bagels. Fans of craft foods like hand-rolled bagels are often suspicious that private investment will flatten the quality or extract the profit and drive the business into the ground. Last month, Raina Richardson, a bagel-loving nurse in Atlanta, attended the opening of the city's first pop-up after her shift. When you see that ripping and dipping on social media, of course you want to try it, she said. At 7 a.m., she said the line was already half a mile long. She noted that Pop-Up had opened just 50 yards away from Emerald City Bagels, a popular producer in the area. That doesn't seem fair, she said, especially because Pop-Up is better funded, but she didn't think it would affect local business in the long term. Once you've tried it, that's it, she said. I'm not going to change over. New Year's Eve was a somber milestone in the relationship between private equity and trendy treats when the remaining Sprinkles cake shops, once famous for his cupcake ATMs, suddenly shuttered, putting hundreds of employees out of work. In 2012, its high-profile founder, Candace Nelson, had been one of the first modern food entrepreneurs to sell to an investment firm, Carp Riley. The play is always to take the thing that made it unique and try to universalize it, said Megan Greenwald, author of Bad Company, Private Equity, and the Death of the American Dream. It's a move that can pay off and put you on every main street in America, or it can collapse spectacularly. What's the best way to remove calluses on your feet? It's almost sandal season, which means it's time to get your feet in shape. Question: I have calluses on the tips of my toes and on my heels. How can I get rid of them? Walking around barefoot in your house, going on long runs, wearing shoes that are too tight or too loose, all of this can create friction on the skin that may eventually lead to calluses. These thick, rough patches are your skin's natural defense against chafing and irritation, said Dr. Sari Priesand, a podiatrist at University of Michigan Health. The skin thickens in response, she said, creating a tough layer that guards against further damage. Calluses can crop up year-round, Dr. Priesand said, but you may notice them more during the warmer months when walking around barefoot or with wearing less supportive shoes like flip-flops. People are generally more active in the summer too, she added. Calluses aren't always something to be worried about, but if they get too thick, they can become painful or even crack, leaving your skin vulnerable to infection, and some find them unsightly. The good news, experts said, is that removing and preventing calluses is fairly straightforward. The hard truth about calluses can form on any part of the body that regularly encounters pressure or friction, said Dr. Jacob Beer, a dermatologist in West Palm Beach, Florida. This includes the balls of the feet, the heels, and the bottoms and sides of toes. They're also common on hands. Golfers, weightlifters, and gymnasts get calluses frequently. People who have irregularly shaped feet or toes, such as those with bunions, hammer toes, or flat feet, also get them often. Calluses appear as yellowish or whitish thickened areas of skin that feel rough, said Dr. Chang Bison, a dermatologist in New York City. They're usually painless, but if the skin gets too thick, they can become tender and uncomfortable to put pressure on. He said sometimes this may cause you to walk unevenly. Calluses are often confused with corns, Dr. San said. While they're both hardened areas of skin that form as a defense against friction, corns are usually smaller, rounder, more painful, and have deep, hard centers, Dr. Priesand said. Calluses are generally flatter and cover a broader area, she explained. How to treat and prevent calluses on the feet. To prevent calluses, wear shoes that fit well, are supportive, and don't rub or put pressure on specific areas of your foot, Dr. Beer said. This may include avoiding high heels or footwear that is too tight or has a narrow toe box, as well as socks that slide or bunch up in your shoe. Adding an orthotic can help improve your shoe's fit and add support. Avoid walking around barefoot, whether indoors or outdoors, Dr. Priesand added. When inside, wear indoor shoes like clogs or supportive slippers. Wearing socks is better than going barefoot, she said, but it is typically not enough to fully prevent calluses. Applying callus cushions, small, soft, round, adhesive-backed pads to callus-prone areas can also reduce friction. And moisturizing your feet daily can help prevent the buildup of thickened skin by keeping them hydrated. If a callus becomes bothersome, you can typically remove it in about 2 to 4 weeks, Dr. Beer said. Remove some of the hardened skin by gently filing the callus with a pumice stone or emery board. Soaking your feet first or taking a shower or a bath will soften the skin, making calluses easier to remove. The goal is to smooth the calluses, not to get as much skin off as possible, which may cause pain or bleeding. Dr. Beer said, avoid cheese grater style files, which may cut your feet and raise the risk of infection. If you have diabetic or general neuropathy in your feet, talk with your doctor before filing a callus, as a lack of sensation during filing could lead to injury. You've been listening to a reading of articles and features from the April 15th issue of the New York Times. Your reader has been Claudia, and I thank you for listening.